In The Final Prayer, there is a Lovecraftian entity that really embodies cosmic horror and just how irrelevant our beliefs are when faced with these beings. During a christening, the grounds of a church start to shake and cameras start glitching. The people gathered believe they're witnessing a miracle, but what actually happened is that they awoke an ancient entity buried beneath the church, something far removed from what they believe in. And this one isn't here to bless anyone or perform miracles. It's only there to feed, reminding us just how fragile and insignificant we and our beliefs are when facing these beings. Welcome everyone to another video exploring various depictions of cosmic horror from media that I consumed recently. Today we'll talk about stuff from all over. Impossible places, monsters, psychological stuff, and even freaky ancient gods hiding in bathroom stalls.
You need to satisfy my physical form.
Cosmic horror is about the awareness that humanity occupies a fragile, almost meaningless place in the universe. It's about the fear of things we can't fully perceive or explain, where the existence of these alien forces alone is enough to unravel our sense of reality. Be warned that I will be spoiling everything, and let's get started. So as mentioned in the intro, the first movie I will talk about today is Final Prayer, also known as Borderlands. This is a found footage horror movie from 2013, directed by Elliot Goldner. It starts with two guys going to a recently reopened church to check out the claims that a miracle happened during a christening. There is a video from the event where the ground starts shaking, and this was interpreted as God's reaction or message of some sort, especially by the priest of the church. So one of them is a tech guy and the other is an ex-priest. And there's some weird stuff happening from the very beginning. While they're eating dinner, they hear some screeching and they come to find a burning sheep. The priest at the church acts really weird and prays at night while stuff is flying around. And even on the ghost hunting equipment, they find some leads, such as a baby crying. Once the priest of the church jumps off the roof because what he thought was God didn't want to talk to him, they call in another priest from the Vatican to exorcise the church grounds. He explains that the church was built on a pagan site of significance, more specifically, on top of a literal deity under the ground, and this thing has returned like weeds and now needs to be taken care of. He begins an exorcism, and naturally, it doesn't go well. Everything starts shaking again, the lights start flickering, and they end up in a cave system under the church. They do some exploring and find a bunch of small bones, which turn out to be there for quite a sad reason. Earlier, when they were researching the church, they came across a journal written by the last minister before the church originally closed, where he claims that the Lord spoke to him in his dreams and told him to open an orphanage. So whatever cosmic entity lives here clearly instructed people back in the day to organize a food supply. This also explains why the creature awoke during the christening. In another journal entry, he says how he understands the perfect, hideous logic of the orphanage, and that he has a new master now. So even the most devout believers seem to have fallen apart when faced with this creature. They keep exploring, but the ground around them becomes soft and starts to shrink, and it actually turns out that they entered a living organism that is about to digest them. So despite some believing this was God when it first appeared, it turns out to be a creature that doesn't care about any religion, just a hungry monster. The premise of some ancient pagan evil being tucked away under a church and coming back reminded me of The Church from 1989 by Mikel Soavi, which I can definitely recommend. There, a church is built on some witch burning grounds, and some monsters come back centuries later. Then the ending reminded me of that Nope scene, which was terrifying when I first saw it. So as grim as it is, I am glad that I found maybe an even scarier depiction of a cosmic entity eating people. And the fact this one is found footage definitely adds to that effect. In fact, if I was to recommend a found footage film to someone, I think I would bring this movie up from now on. And I really like the setting. It's this dark, gloomy English countryside that definitely has a lot of secrets and malevolent things lurking around. Maybe there's a bunch more monsters hiding under churches in the countryside. And when they're exploring and reading the journal, I really enjoyed that part. I always like when there's field work done in movies and then analyzing what they found afterwards and doing research on it. I really like that stuff. The Banshee Chapter is a 2013 horror film directed by Blair Erickson. It starts off as a found footage film and kind of remains that way even when there is no character there to hold the camera, which I thought was pretty interesting. The movie begins by talking about MK Ultra, a program done by the CIA where they gave weird drugs to people in order to torture them. In the movie, they say that everyone who was exposed to this got transported somewhere and saw the same thing. Some sort of malevolent entities, supposedly called Banshees. This guy James is researching this stuff and writing a book on it, so naturally, he himself takes the drug, called DMT-19. He starts to hear some sounds from a radio and goes to follow them. Then he realizes that something is coming towards the house. His friend who was recording follows this trail, and then he finds James, who's making a weird face, and James then disappears. James's friend Anne takes the story from there, trying to find out what happened to him. This takes her to the guy who gave him the drug, and then she witnesses him and another girl take the drug themselves. Everyone starts tripping and seeing things, even Anne, who didn't take anything. She hears that same melody that James heard when he was taking the drug. Blackburn's friend is hit the hardest, saying that the entities want to wear us, and then she makes a similar face to James's from the beginning. They go to her house to try and find some answers, and this is when Blackburn explains that the chemical turns your mind into a receiver and allows these entities to target you. He then also mentions an H.P. Lovecraft story called From Beyond, about a scientist who made a tuning fork that emitted a wave to nearby people and allowed them to see otherworldly things. In the story, when the machine is activated, people see a translucent dimension filled with strange, indescribable creatures. But the device not only lets humans perceive these beings, but also allows the beings to perceive humans. He admits that his servants were drawn into this overlapping dimension and killed by one of the entities. As the narrator realizes one of the creatures is behind him, he panics and destroys the machine with a gunshot, and his friend immediately dies. So it's clear that something similar is happening in the movie. When you take the drug, it weakens your mind and allows these entities to see you, and then try to take over your body and wear you. And we get to see a cool example of this at the very end. Anyway, Anne and Blackburn go exploring and are met with some jump scares. They eventually reach the actual government facility that the MK Ultra experiments took place at, and they find out that the entities actually gave the formula to the people doing the experiments. So that's interesting and a little funny to imagine, that these incomprehensible entities worked with the scientists doing the experiments just to torture people. This place seems to be a sort of transmitter for the entities and the radio signals. I guess this is the tuning fork from the H.P. Lovecraft story. So naturally they try to destroy it, but not before Anne has to face with one of the entities. The face looks deformed and it has long arms with some sort of big claws instead of hands. And this guy, of course, turns out to be the remnants of her friend James, because she finds his clothes. So this is what it looks like when an entity fully takes over somebody. And it's interesting that these are called banshees, because in Irish folklore, banshees come to you and scream when it's time for death. And in this movie, when it's time to get taken over, you hear the weird melody before they get you. She does manage to escape it, and at first it might seem that it was kind of easy to do that with a Lovecraftian entity, but I think that these creatures aren't all that powerful, since they have to possess humans to even have a physical shape that we can comprehend. So DMT is a real drug, but the 19 variant is only in this movie, as far as I know. Users of DMT do say they experience some otherworldly effects and see entities that only make sense while they're under the effect of the drug. Once it wears off, it becomes harder to explain and remember exactly what their mind witnessed. So I thought the premise of tying this to cosmic horror was spot on, since it already has some elements of that in the real world. And then the movie just amplified that a ton and made it malevolent. So despite not taking the substance, Anne heard the radio and was exposed to the entities. And so was James' friend in the beginning. So I believe that when you take it, not only it makes you aware and vulnerable to the entities, but anyone close to you, like a area of effect kind of thing. Marebito is a 2004 horror movie directed by Takashi Shimizu. The protagonist, Masuoka, likes to walk around with a video camera and record what's going on around him. In the very first scene, he films a man stabbing himself in the eye in a subway station. Masuoka becomes fascinated by the fear the man must have felt in those final seconds, and that single moment sends him on a quest for a deeper understanding of that raw, primal terror. And I thought this concept was very interesting, a man that is obsessed with fear and trying to dissect how to get to that point of complete terror. Usually in these kinds of stories, madness comes to you, rather than you going looking for it. His search leads him into a subterranean world beneath Tokyo, a system of tunnels that seem to defy logic, known as the Mountains of Madness, just like the Lovecraft story. And here we get to my favorite recurring theme in cosmic horror: impossible places that defy our logic, and us trying to traverse them the best we can with our abilities. This place seems ancient and untouched by man or meaning that we can understand. He finds a girl of some sort chained in the dark. She's mute, kind of feral, and she has no clear origin or explanation as to why she's there. Masuoka takes her back to his house and begins to care for her. But he soon realizes that her food of choice is blood, which he takes from himself at first, and then others as well. She is quite a mystery. She might be supernatural, entirely human, or something in between. And her actually existing in those mountains of madness is questionable because obviously in our world they don't exist under Tokyo, as far as I know. If anything, they would be in Antarctica like Lovecraft's story. So Masuoka must have brought her back from another dimension, or there is another option that I don't think is as cool. At one point in the movie, a woman comes and claims that her daughter is missing, and that Masuoka is the father. So this really adds a new perspective to what really might have happened here. Maybe Masuoka kidnapped his own daughter and did really weird things that we only get to see symbolically or through this other perspective of him finding her and feeding her. So this idea is quite disturbing, even though far more likely than him actually going to that other dimension. Masuoka also talks about the Deros, referencing Richard Shaver's 1940s tales of malevolent underground beings in Hollow Earth. The film never clarifies whether this mythology is true or a symptom of Masuoka's deteriorating mind. We do see them a few times throughout the movie, but it could just be him seeing things, and both options are equally valid. This combination of Lovecraft and Shaver is interesting because Lovecraft's Mountains of Madness were in Antarctica, and Shaver's stories also took place in Antarctica, but one that turned out to be green, more similar to the movie. This movie was quite interesting. Instead of madness coming to you, like in most cosmic horror stories, Masuoka is a character that is already mad, and this madness twists and justifies his perspective and reality. Who knows what really happened to that girl, if she was his daughter, or where he found her. We'll never know the real course of events, or what really happened, because that realness is irrelevant. All we get is a twisted reality of this one man and his story. The look of the film is pretty cool. It has that camcorder early 2000s old tech vibe, which I love. It's also worth noting the film's fixation on media. Masuoka's camera is his main tool, but also his prison. He sees everything through that lens. Like many protagonists in cosmic horror, he's desperate to observe, but that act of observation is what gets him. If he never recorded that guy in the subway, he wouldn't search for true fear, and none of this would have happened. Glorious is a 2022 film directed by Rebecca McKendry, and this one is actually a horror comedy, which adds a new layer to the cosmic horror side. It starts with Wes stopping at a deserted rest stop. It's a miserable place with vending machines humming in the heat, an empty parking lot, and a bathroom that feels like a forgotten corner of the world. Inside, Wes hears a voice speaking to him from the next stall.
Everything all right over there, my friend?
At first, it's almost casual, like a stranger making small talk, which is what Wes believes. But there's something off about it. It's kind of too calm and oddly measured, like the voice doesn't match the setting. You would sooner expect some tweaker rather than a perfectly calculated conversation. Wes tries to catch a glimpse, but the stall is conveniently too dark and shadowed. And the rules of the encounter is that Wes isn't allowed to look. Even a glimpse would be too much for him. As the dialogue continues, the entity reveals itself as, of course, something ancient and incomprehensible. But what stood out to me was the implication that it isn't here because it wants to be. This thing is trapped here inside the geometry of the stall. I'd always thought of these entities as freely moving between worlds, slipping into auras when it suited them. But here, this thing is stuck, bound to a rest stop bathroom. It's disturbing but also kind of funny. The idea that something so vast and terrifying could be reduced to confinement in a place so pathetic. And this is where the comedy adds a new perspective. It shows how ridiculous an encounter with an incomprehensible entity might actually be. And at times the humor was a little too much and kind of took me out of the vibe, but that's alright. So the thing won't let him leave. The more he talks, the more it becomes clear that he was chosen for this by fate or something else. And nothing he says can change that. There's no bargaining here. Turns out that Wes was destined to come here and the thing wants something from him. Initially thinking it was something he couldn't really live without, but it turns out that the creature wanted his liver in order for the world to not collapse. And Wes does cut his liver out and give it to the creature. This movie was pretty unique because it never really left the bathroom setting, which on paper sounds like a lame setting, but because it's so ordinary, it becomes special. The bathroom became a stage where two realities overlap: the fragile human perspective and the presence of something that doesn't need or want his input. This counter was unavoidable. Even in a filthy roadside bathroom, the infinite can reach out and decide your fate. Thank you for watching.